In today's session, we're going to cover how to not set up a pilot and avoid common pitfalls, set clear, measurable goals aligned with company strategy, secure buy-in from key stakeholders, how to use data and analytics to guide your decision-making, and how to implement feedback loops for continuous improvement and scalability. Without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to our amazing panelists today. Matt, I'll kick it off to you.
Thanks, Sarah. My name is Matt Kubarek. I am the Director of Training and Development for Intown Suites and Uptown Suites. Intown is our extended stay side of things. I've been with the company for about 18 years now, so have a lot of ins and outs of the extended stay world and seen some things. So love to get some good questions and I hope you guys enjoy the session.
Thanks. Over to you, Steph.
Hey, I'm Steph Jarm. I'm a restaurant operations and training consultant at the training table. I've been in the hospitality industry for over 20 years, worked every position from hostess to line cook, and now I get to help independent restaurant brands scale their operations, train their team, and open more restaurants. And so, pilots, testing, and LTOs is sort of my wheelhouse. So happy to share my knowledge and answer your questions.
Awesome. So to kick off the session, wanted to set some context. Why conduct a pilot? We talk to our customers about pilots pretty often when they're evaluating an LMS or when they're looking to kick off a new training initiative. This is central to how we approach launch with our customers. We want to make sure that what they're trying to do is really measurable and ultimately successful. And thinking about 2025 and budget planning and thinking about where training is in the context of all of that, it's really important that training directors, ops directors understand what the value of a pilot is and how they can use it in their organization to define clear objectives, lay out success criteria that will help you earn a seat at the table and help you communicate with your C-level leadership, how to scope it out. I think we've all been part of pilots at some point in our career, whether we know it or not, whether it was official or managed or communicated properly. So really nice to have our experts here to weigh in on how do you scope it out? How do you design this for success? And then ultimately, what pilots really give you an opportunity to do is engage key stakeholders and get that buy-in that you're looking for. A lot of times we hear from customers is they're trying to help drive home the value of what training is. You're trying to get that investment, but you're told to do more with less resources. And really making the case for training comes down to getting buy-in and thinking about the what's in it for them from the C-level perspective with your location managers or franchise business consultants, anyone in the field that can come back you up. While it's oftentimes you can feel like a team of one and you have a lot of variables, thinking about laying things out in a pilot helps everything feel a little bit more manageable. And it's almost like running a science experiment where you're in control and there's really no such thing as success or failure. So without further ado, I can kick this off. Steph, you're coming in as a resident restaurant ops consultant. You've had your hands in so many pots, so to speak. How do you go about visualizing a pilot program from start to finish?
It can be a big undertaking. And, we've talked about this before, but I think the planning of a pilot and the brainstorming and marinating about what that's going to look like is just as important as the pilot itself. And I cannot stress that enough. For me, I always start with, our company values and our mission statement. Is this idea that we have in alignment with our core values? And I think that's always a first place to start. And it's going to help you get that buy-in if you can tie everything back to those values. Because for me, the values are your compass. They are what drive your decision making. So I think step one is, does this pilot feel like a good fit for our brand and what we're trying to accomplish? And sort of once we get past that, figuring out, there's a lot of decisions we want to think about, and it could vary based on the subject matter. Are we rolling out a piece of software? Are we rolling out a new menu item? And are we rolling out a new standard operating procedure? Each one of those things may have a different path, but in general, I think creating the pilot is about finding a small testing area, getting some people who you can align with to test this theory out and understanding what data you're going to use. We'll talk about this a little bit later in the conversation about data-driven decision making, but understanding when you set a pilot up, how are you going to measure the success? And what I think it's important to think about what failure might look at from the beginning. So if you know what the goal might be, if it's successful, try to imagine what would look like if it didn't go that way. Because I think the faster you can understand that, once you get rolling, you can eliminate any like time wasting if you start to go down that path. And again, there's no success or failure. It's all lessons, right? So I think having that vision of what it could look like if it's a win and what it could look like if it's a fail is sort of step 2 of the thinking process. And then from there, it's about designing the steps and really laying it out on paper and being like, what are all the things we need to do to set up for this? What kind of materials do we need? Do we need to create something for the field? What kind of conversations do we need to have? Who needs to be involved in those conversations? And then going through that process. And then it's the execution phase, right? So actually getting into the field and working on it with your team. So I think that those are some of like the initial steps. And to me, it's so important to have it out all on paper. It can't just be an idea that you're going off of like emotion. And I imagine that some people in this group are in leadership positions and were promoted from within. And I think it's so important to lean on that experience, because when you're in the front line and you're in the trenches, you know what it's like every day. And so you might have this amazing idea that's going to fix this problem. And the people in the executive level might not have the same pain points as you. So being able to articulate that is going to be sort of part of that process as you pitch it as well.
That's great. I love what you said about defining what failure looks like, and we have a good question that came in registration, but like oftentimes during a pilot, we can face what's called like scope creep, where we sort of lose track of the target.
Oh, yeah.
And so outlining those scenarios of like, here's the why, and this is how it's tied back to our company objectives. This is how it ties back to our core values. The why is really important because, like you said, it brings stakeholders around the table with you because you're aligned around that one mission. And then when you're looking at your goals or like your outcomes, it is good to like lay out, here's what we're not looking for, because you want to prevent and kind of pad for that scope creep. Matt, I wanted to ask, from the hotel side, you have completely different set of variables. You're working with a completely different type of operator. When you're looking to get buy-in and you're thinking through like the why, how do you approach that conversation?
Well, I think I'll echo the values because I think that's super important. Every decision we do, we try to tie it to a value. I mean, you should try to tie it to a value. If you don't or you can't, it's kind of silly that you have the value in the first place. But it doesn't apply to everything. But that's one of the things that we do. Just looking at values and how like any pilot we would tie that to a value, and then any just company core initiatives. So the example I'll use in a little bit is, we had an issue with just labor hours and we couldn't figure out why that was. And that was, a hot topic in mind for everybody. And, when you start to analyze that a little bit and just analyze where those numbers are coming from, how that affects the organization. And, could we train differently or do something differently to bring those numbers down? So there's a lot of things you could do there.
That's great. I think something that, we were talking about before in our kickoff session was incorporating opportunities for feedback too in the process. So when you are involving stakeholders early on, it's easy to like have this initial buildup of excitement and have all that synergy at the beginning. In terms of communicating, updates or working in like touch bases, how do you maintain that like focus over time if it's like a long or short pilot?
I'll take that one. I mean, I think you said it. It's about establishing the ground rules for communication throughout the process. So one thing that's worked really well for me in short-term pilots is, hey, I'm going to send an email at the end of the week to those stakeholders, recapping, hey, what happened this week? What did we learn? What are the things we're going to do differently next week? You can do it in your Slack channels, however you communicate. But honestly, if we want to just be bare bones here and not get into like the crazy data, keep it as simple as an email recap, just so the people that are sort of waiting on those results are getting a little bit of the story as it goes, and they know that you're actively working on that pilot. And, then they get a chance to share that feedback. And obviously, if you're creating a bigger pilot, longer scope, longer timeline, you can build in surveys or checkpoints or, whatever. And again, that's all part of that planning discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We'll make sure to come back to surveys. I know Matt has a lot to add there.
Yeah, checkpoints are good too. I mean, just to kind of where do we anticipate our progress to be at this moment in time? So it's like, we have, whether that's a weekly check-in or, a bi-weekly or whatever the case may be, are we moving in the direction we thought we would go? And if we're not, what's the pain point and how do we solve for that? So you're constantly evaluating that.
Totally. How do you deal with like unknown or any kind of uncertainty during a pilot? So something as simple as like, okay, we're not seeing results yet. How would you approach like reporting that out?
Well, I think the checkpoints are good because some pilots we know are going to take some time. It's you're not going to see immediate results. So the example I'll share a little later is you're not going to see that immediate result, and it's going to take some time. And I think if you know that up front, it's an easier sell, and you have to just stick with that. But if it's something that you were looking at and you thought you would get an immediate result, well, again, what are the pain points there, and how, what do you think the problem is, and start looking at that a little deeper. And pilots are designed to change all the time. So, I mean, that's one thing, if it's not working, and it's not going to work, then pivot.
Mm-hmm. I think, for the purpose of our discussion, I think we should have like a central example that we kind of talk around, because I think it can feel pretty abstract pretty quickly. Steph, when we did our kickoff, you mentioned like a simple LTO. And I think a lot of people in the audience can relate to like an LTO and how you would, or a new menu item, you want to pilot that at one location and the things that you're going to be stress testing for. When you're working with your clients and you're trying to say like, and they need to launch like a new menu, or they need to launch like a new product offering basically, or something new, a new aspect to their service. How are you like guiding, maybe really inexperienced operators or a younger, or less people with less tenure through that pilot?
Yeah, I do have a great example. I'll save the LTO, I think, for a little bit, but one that comes to mind now is a client of mine wanted to launch her weekly meal prep service. It's a service that she's been offering. It was like built in her legacy website. It had no data-driven analytics, and she had moved into the Toast POS platform for her in-store sales, and we wanted to get the service into Toast. And so, getting the menu items in there was easy, but obviously Toast has its own just process for guest checkout and whatever. And so we had to update sort of like the rules and policies for her customer experience. And we were a little nervous on how it was going to go. For example, we had to raise the minimum order amount. And that we didn't go, I think originally she had it set to like $40, and we had gotten her to commit to like a $75 minimum for a delivery component, which doesn't sound that bad when it's a weekly meal service, so you're getting a bunch of meals for the week. And so I set her up for that, and I'm like, look, we're never really going to know what customers are going to think about something. We're trying to make the best decision with their perspective in mind, but the only feedback we're going to get around this is the customer feedback. So we can do our best to set up those expectations, get out the messaging, and then we have to see what happens. And one of the things that we did is we selected her top 20 customers that order consistently on a regular basis, and we let them order first while it was live. So we sent them a private email and we said, hey, we're transitioning to this new system. You're a valued customer. We know that you love the service. It's all the same food. It's all the same things, but we're going to order it this way. We'd love for you to order here and share your feedback. And a lot of them did. And the biggest thing that they came up with was the minimum. And so she ended up, when we went live, she did end up rolling that back down to $50. And it only took a week for her to kind of realize that, because the orders had dropped than their usual quantity. So I think, Matt said it too, is like, in the restaurant world, every shift has some unexpected event. It's why we say shift happens, right? It's kind of like a nod to, you have to expect the unexpected, and you got to go into any kind of pilot or testing sort of with that same like confidence to handle it, whatever it is, and being able to pivot and not get like locked into these like cement milestones. You have to kind of think about them as, put them in sand, right? So that they can be sort of moved and shifted as you go.
I think that's a great analogy, or a great metaphor for a pilot, is just creating a sandbox. So, the environment itself is not very concrete. Things are going to shift, and it's just a matter of like, do you know how big your sandbox is? Do you know what your sample size is and what you're working with? Do you know the boundaries of what you can play without? But also, like, if you need to enhance it, then great. Like, make the case for that, or if you need to decrease it to get more accurate feedback. Like, I love the example of working with like the top 20 customers. Were there moments during that, I guess, that pilot where you were thinking, okay, we're losing track of the impetus of all this, of the why, of switching these systems, and like, what do we need to go back to? Because when you open the floor to like customer feedback, sometimes it raises other questions about like, okay, well, actually, the problem might be the order minimum, or how do we actually like, or I don't know, a customer is actually saying like, hey, actually the ordering experience was better on this order platform for these reasons. I'm just listing examples.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, in this particular case, it was pretty easy. I mean, she loves Toast as a POS system for her in-store and catering. And it obviously made sense for her to have all of her ordering and inventory and numbers and everything in one system. So it had to happen. And customers can order Monday through Friday for the Monday delivery or pickup. And so it really just took that 1 week of turn on to sort of see that difference. And like you said, when you open it up to customer feedback, they're going to tell you, you're going to have your raging fans be super supportive and send, oh, it might be nice if you do this tweak. And then you'll have people who maybe struggle with technology, and then they hate the whole thing, and they're going to, you got to just take it with a little grain of salt and really kind of look through some of that emotion and be like, is this a technology problem? Is this a process problem? And just kind of put your objective hat on at all times.
For sure. Matt, I want to open the floor for you in case you had anything to comment on.
No, not with this. I think this is a good discussion, though, for sure.
If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. Love to move on to our next section here on data-driven decision-making. So, using the example of, switching e-commerce platforms, or Matt, I want to think of something more relevant to you in hotels. Like, when you're thinking, how do you know you're tracking the right KPIs? Like, when you lay out a pilot program to maybe like migrate over to a new technology, or you're launching a new like loyalty program, how do you know you're tracking the right KPIs from the beginning?
We have to understand what you want those KPIs to hopefully do for you, right? So you have to identify what those are, and with the pilot program we did, we had measurable things that we were hoping to get out of it. One, we were hoping to get labor savings. We were hoping to get employee satisfaction out of it. So those are all good, key performance indicators on, is this working or is this not working? And weekly check-ins, which is something we were doing, and just kind of just monitoring that, and just be willing to pivot if you need to pivot. It might not be the KPI that you were looking for, but there may be valid reasons for that. So we were hoping to see instant labor savings, but we knew that wasn't going to happen. And you have to just give some of that some time. But I think that's really just the biggest thing is, what would you like to get out of them? What are some performance things that why are you doing the program? What are performance things you want to, and then just kind of monitor that and pivot if you need to.
That's great. Steph, when you're consulting with clients, sometimes they might not have access to like a lot of great data beyond like what's in their POS or in like a restaurant 365, like a back of house platform. Have you had to like roll up your sleeves and kind of set up like basic tracking?
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of ways to do this. Like if you're a restaurant group or, any group and you don't have all these softwares loaded into your business, I mean, you could do a paper and pen survey that you could hand out to your customers or to your team and leave it anonymous and have a bunch of check boxes, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much did you like this? Any feedback, kind of, you can go old school with it. And if you have a little bit of tech savviness, but again, you don't have the software, one of the tools that I utilize a lot is Google Forms. I mean, so many people have access to Google Drive. You can set up a very simple Google form that's a survey. You can leave it anonymous or not, and then you can send it out via email or, however you want to communicate. And again, it depends on who we're talking to, whether our customers or our team. Can you text it out to your team and have your team sort of generate that data for you? So I do think that there's ways to create data if you don't already have access to it. And a third recommendation I have is just talk to your people. So whether it's customers or your team, like let's use a new operating procedure as an example. Maybe before this particular salad was cooked on the cold side, but it always gets dragged up because hot side is has to make the protein for it. And so instead of cold side serving the salad and waiting for hot side, I don't know, maybe we decide to pass it from one station to another and it gets served out of hot side so nobody forgets the salad. I don't know, I'm making this up as I go. But explaining to your team, hey, we want to make a change, we're testing it, and communicating why this test is happening, and just being like, look guys, I know it's going to be a change of muscle memory and we're going to have to all work together to make this happen. Give me 7 days on this. Just give me 30 days on this. I want to hear your feedback, but let's all commit to testing this together, because if it helps everybody, then it's a win-win. And if it absolutely sucks and it makes your life horrible, then, we won't make it a forever thing. But I do think that the qualitative data that you can get through just talking to people and taking notes and writing it down in a designated spot, I mean, that's data too, and not to be dismissed.
Yeah, we did something very similar because employee feedback is really important within our organization. And I heard a funny quote the other day, and it said, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And it's kind of funny, but it's really true when you really think about it. And and there's several ways to get the data. Like I said, we do pulse surveys with our employees all the time. They 30, 60, 90 days if they're new, and then every quarter we survey the entire company, and they're just basic questions. But we want to see what is the temperature out there? Like, what are some pain points, and how can we improve as an organization? So, one of our core values is efficiency. And that was a good segue for me to tie in a pilot, a housekeeping program, because one of the survey questions were, do I feel overwhelmed at my job? And we had a really high percentage of housekeepers said yes, they're incredibly overwhelmed at their job, and it's a tough job to begin with, right? So it's like, well, how can we make this easier for them? And ironically, we're also talking about housekeeping labor and why is it so high? So do those correlate? Or is there a connection there? And for my case, there was. It was a in your face connection, and then so how do you pivot and do something with that? But yeah, if you don't have the data, there's several ways to get it, and surveys are a great way to do it, whether it's with your customer or with your employee, for sure. They'll tell you a lot.
I like the idea of a pulse report with employees.
Mhm.
I think in restaurants, we have so much data on the consumer, but we
Mhm.
don't have that same data parity about our
Crazy.
employees. And it is, I think, on the operator, on the owner, to create those surveys to actually get the insights that they're looking for. For something as simple as like, do you feel overwhelmed? Where's your job satisfaction? How do you feel in terms of like the readiness in your role? Something that came in with the registration I thought was a really good question is how to navigate and target, Gen Z, Gen X, baby boomers. You can't talk to them as if they're one big group, especially in training. I think like everybody has different learning styles, preferred formats, just what they generationally grew up in. Do you have any like tips for navigating, not we're kind of getting out of the scope of a pilot, but to bring it back, when you're launching a pilot, you're thinking about all the age groups involved. Do you have any tips on taking that into account and being thoughtful depending on who you're working with?
Yeah, I could take this one. So we deliver training in so many different ways within our organization. There's the typical watch, read, do, and hands-on kind of stuff. But we've taken it one step further with we have an internal social media platform that we've embodied through the entire company. It's one of our CEO's biggest initiatives. He loves it. He brought it in when he came with us, but it really gets the employees engaged. And it's an easy way for us to deploy quick videos, because when you look at like Gen Z and stuff, they want a TikTok style video, and we need to deliver that. And there's a lot of ways that we can do it. So we incorporate technology from that aspect of it. And then we also have the other aspect of it where we have the old school videos, and just for someone who wants to watch the video and wants to read the book and that kind of thing. So I think you have to, when you think about training, you have to, because we're at that place where we have so many different age groups currently in the workforce, and you have to, when you develop training, you have to cover all of those boxes. You have to check all those boxes. Not everyone's going to consume those boxes, but you have to check all those boxes. So that's just something we do internally.
That's great. But curious, what is the name of the internal social media platform?
It's called Beekeeper. We've rebranded it. It's pretty cool. Everyone was very, very nervous when the CEO said, "Hey, you're doing this," and we're like, "Oh, great! What can go wrong here?" But it turns out it went off pretty well. We thought we were going to have a lot of disgruntled employees or just inappropriate stuff. Really wasn't. I mean, we have live streams for the company. We've tailored it to just like housekeepers, property maintenance technicians, regional people. So it's really been a great way for them to keep connected and stay focused, share best practices. I think from a training angle, one of the challenges is, they'll post something, like, "Hey, look what I did. I reorganized my housekeeping card." And it's like totally wrong. So it's one of those things where you have to, do that delicate dance of, "Hey, why don't you check out this video?" Like, but other than that, it's been really successful. We get a lot of buy-in from it. People look forward to kind of just the interaction with people. And it's not this big, the corporate monster versus the employee, right? And that's something I think every company faces, and that's one of the reasons why our CEO likes it so much, is because he drives that ship. I mean, he is posting every single day, and from a leadership level, we are expected to post every day. We're actually bonused on it. So
Wow.
yeah, he's pretty serious about it, and it's one of our bonus metrics. Our engagement and our interaction. So it's pretty cool.
That Yeah,
Love
I
that.
want to actually.
Yeah, they're going to be a chart. I think summer, winter. I think the summer conference. They've been working with Terra, so I think they're going to be one of the vendors in the resource gallery for the summer conference at Chart.
That's really cool. Cool. Was that something that you had to pilot, or was that something that the CEO kind of brought in? It was like
Yeah,
everybody on
yeah.
board.
It was like, we're doing this, figured out. So there was no pilot. So we were voluntold. So
Love that.
and they've been a great resource on just like best practices and how to do it and everything like that. So it's been super successful for us, and it's great to deal with that younger audience too, because that's what they want.
Great. Steph, do you have anything to add? I felt like you were going to speak up.
I know this webinar isn't like a plug for Opus, but I do think that Opus has been really great in our ability to connect with the younger generation. I see the difference. I've been with some of my clients long enough to witness the transition from their old training platform to Opus, and the level of adoption and engagement is like through the roof. So I really think that, but I really encourage people, just like you said, I call them the TikTok training videos. Like that's, the more we can do that and the more we can engage with that. And, if you're a training director or a district manager out there and, you see those those pain points that you're like those things that are, keeping you up at night and those headaches, like make a quick video about it, throw it up in your platform, in your messaging tool, and just get it out there by video.
Yep.
Thank you for a great soundbite. And yes, for anyone listening, our webinars are not intended to be product demonstrations or hype videos for Opus. But yes, accessibility actually is something that we talk about constantly as a company, because a lot of people struggle to get traction with their training initiatives because people just can't use the technology that they're being given, or they're outgrowing the needs of paper because it doesn't translate. It needs to be available in another language. I mean, the way that we approach building training in Opus is by thinking, like, how do we get this into the hands of as many people as possible, and how is it like as easily digestible? So I love that you brought that up. It's not something that it's definitely not like a social platform, but it does enhance like the peer-to-peer learning that's already happening, and it makes it really easy to just get the word out there. I'm gonna have to look into Beekeeper.
Yeah, Beekeeper. Yeah.
Beekeeper.
And we've done some just random pilots too, just from the technology front. Our CEO despises paper with a passion. We have a ton of it, just through checklists and stuff. So we try to digitalize some of that stuff, and we did pilot it, and we thought we had it right, and it went terribly wrong. It just wasn't the technology wasn't there. It wasn't doing what we needed it to do, and but we tried it, and we pivoted, and we said, this is not ready for prime time, and we pulled the plug, and they're still developing it and stuff. But I mean, there are things that you can do that will make things easier, but there's also, you have to understand when it's not working to pull it quickly. And that was one of the things we learned very early on. It's like we gave it 2 months. We're like, this is awful. Let's just stop. Why are we doing this?
You were trying to digitize a checklist.
Yeah, just like action plans and stuff. But you need the form. I mean, a housekeeper needs to know what rooms they need to clean, and they need to know what they need to do in those rooms, and they have to make notes and stuff like that. So it was tricky, to give them all phones or iPads, and then you have that whole issue of the iPad ends up in a shower somewhere, and because they've dropped it, or it's in. So I mean, there was a lot of headaches with it, but it was a good test to kind of just go paperless or as much as we can.
For sure.
That was a good pitfall that we had.
That's a really good, and we'll get into pitfalls.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I jumped the gun. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Perfect timing. So when we're thinking about this iterative improvement and scaling, okay, your pilot's out the door. You're already seeing results, positive, negative. What happens next? In the case of like what Matt just said, you're seeing things like not work out. You're facing a lot of like negative externalities, if you will, of like the iPad being in the shower, or people just not responding to it. Because I think sometimes when we have that initial problem, the first solution that we think of is not the best, no matter how well it's like messaged or marketed to us. You think you don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket, so to speak, but oftentimes we do. And I think that restaurant tech is interesting to be in, because you see so many, point solutions and companies enter the market of like, we're here to solve this, or we're the new way to do that. When you think about iterative improvement and scaling, Matt, like there are common pitfalls to avoid. What would you say are like your top 3?
The top 3 pitfalls, I think. Just, I had something here and I lost it. I think one of the things that we're currently doing is we were changing some technology with internally. We have our property management system, which we're currently going through, and then we had our Epicor system, which was our procurement and ordering and stuff like that. And we were trying to do them almost together, and just the way the schedulings worked out, they were overlapping each other, and that was a huge pitfall. It's like, what are we doing? We can't introduce 2 brand new programs, and that would just be so overwhelming. So that was kind of maybe the first thing we encountered. And then the other thing was just we weren't quick to change with the pilot we were doing internally with the property management system. We weren't quick enough to make changes, and we didn't really recognize, well, what was the old system doing for us and what was the new system doing for us, and we were trying to marry them together. And the reality is you can get close, but you can't always get exact. So then you have to start looking at, well, what is this involved? Is this a policy change? Is this a procedure change? Is this a change we need, and the new company needs to figure it out? So those are some examples that we're currently going through, and that's not always easy, especially when you're dealing with technology, because there's a lot of code and behind the scenes work that no one will ever see. They just want to they just want it to work. And
Mm.
we ran into some of that too, and that we were supposed to deploy that. We're supposed to be deploying it now. We pushed it to next year just because it's nowhere near ready. We had so many things that they needed to solve for.
That's interesting, though. I'm sure the process, though, was like exculpatory in finding holes in the existing policies or procedures, so that
Yeah,
might
yeah.
not have been a tech issue at all.
Correct, and it's issues that you didn't know you had sometimes, but you do, and just because it worked in the old system doesn't mean it's going to work in the new. And what adjustments do you need to make for that? And that can be difficult. So, but
I
you,
like
you
Love
have to manage that. You have to manage that. You have to just constantly evaluate that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like I'm just like cheering for that too. I've seen that many
Yeah,
times. Is like you
all the
want to
time.
do a new system and now all of a sudden it doesn't work the same way. And so then you've got that is instant resistance. Like you might have a manager like call or text and be like, it's not working. What do you mean it's not working? Like pause. It is working. It just works differently. And then are you uncomfortable with change? And I would say that 99% of the time most people, the answer is yes. And so I think that, going back, let's take a couple steps back to the first part of this discussion about planning and making sure that we have the language to communicate to the people and to hold their hand through the process. We're change makers, even in a pilot, even if we decide, hey, we're never going to do this again after this 30 days, getting them to do it for those 30 days requires change, requires a different mindset, requires different knowledge. And so I think one of the ways to avoid a pitfall is when you're ready to roll it out to the field for testing, make sure that your communication about their changed behavior is as simple as it can get. You shouldn't spend more than an hour with them. That might even be too long. Be like, hey, starting tomorrow, we're going to do this. Here's how you do it. Here's what you need to know. All of the stuff that's in that little bucket needs to be super simple, because getting them to change their habits, especially in restaurants. I mean, restaurants are all about routine. We wake up, we open the door, we turn off the alarm, we turn on the lights, we turn on the equipment. Like it's a very routine muscle memory way of being. So when you throw a monkey wrench in there, you got to be ready for that resistance and being able to coax them nicely to the other side.
That's such a good point. We have to help, you know, really help. We have to really help our customers, especially when they come on to Opus. It's like, okay, here, like thinking outside of training, like what are the actual problems going on in your business? Because, if your problems before were like nobody's doing the training, that's easily solvable. And that's something that we know we have a fix for. But what are the problems outside of that? What is like the domino effect of, okay, people are not completing their training, so we're seeing um, poor customer feedback. We're seeing inconsistencies in quality control. So those are getting our customers on that level, just like, hey, we're here to help you, of course, like move your training over to a digital platform or move it into like our Opus system. But these are the problems in the business that we're really paying attention to. I think it's easy to get like a bit narrow-minded during a pilot. And then when you get to a point where you're not really seeing results, it's because like your perspective was so narrow. And really there's like this larger objective to always have in the back of your mind. So Matt, I love the example of trying to digitize like housekeeper checklists or moving away from paper. It's just like you think the problem is paper, but actually what it is just like you have a worker who's in a role where they feel really overwhelmed. Like the problem's not necessarily the medium of like how they're doing their job. It's, well, they're coming to work every day, they feel overwhelmed with all of this to do. And that I think opens up discussion for like so many other questions than say, how do we move this like paper checklist into a digital platform? Um, you can tell me if that feels like a little bit too left field, but something that I wanted to kind of marry between the two of your examples, I think, will like tee up nicely for your case studies. But really quickly, checking in with our audience. Yes, DD messaging on Opus is a great way to do that. I think I know what this was in reference to. Keeping everybody in the loop is like the smallest low lift way to make a pilot feel not necessarily successful, but just like alive and well. Like a quick status update. Awesome. I want to pause to let the audience ask any questions, anything that's coming to mind. Give you a minute. Cool. Going once? Going twice?
And I'd love to hear any reactions to anything. Are you feeling the same pain points that we've experienced? Do you have any great wisdom to share on this topic too? So we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Doesn't have to be a question. Commentary, feedback. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I'll chime in really quick with something too, but especially with like a pilot and changing systems. Is one of the things we wanted to measure success was we ran both systems simultaneously. So if we were trying to measure what really success looked like, and we were trying to figure out what our pain points are between the systems, in the test world, we ran both systems side by side. Here's your day. This is what you're going to do in the old system. This is how you did it on the old system. And here's how you're going to do it in the new system. That was extremely telling for pain points and how to solve for those pain points. So, if you're, especially when you're switching systems, it might not be a bad idea to run both for a little bit to kind of uncover things that you didn't know you existed.
That's a good call out. I like the idea of running the old and the new side by side, so you have like real time.
Yeah, it's easy to do too. Most of the time, it's easy to do.
Cool. Alrighty, I think we can move on to part 4. So I want to invite you two to share, lessons from in the field. This is kind of like my favorite part of our webinars, is where we just get to share like, hey, this is what's happening in my world. It starts to feel a little like therapeutic, but like it's nice to share like what goes wrong. Oftentimes, like we learn from our setbacks, from our failures. And I know that like sometimes you want to come onto a webinar and talk about your training successes. I want to hand you guys the floor to talk about recent pilots or things that you've tried to roll out where you maybe saw success and then also didn't see success. Matt, I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, so we did a just having said a few things I did earlier, just we had the initiative of our housekeeping labor is high. We didn't know why it was high. We had surveys saying that housekeepers felt overwhelmed. So we took a little deeper dive into that, and just started talking to some of the field trainers and stuff, like what are they seeing out there? What are the pain points? And one of the examples were they just weren't being efficient. The housekeeping carts were not stocked at all correctly. Some of them were just abysmal, really. And when you look at overwhelmed, well, it's no wonder they were overwhelmed. They're running back and forth to the supply room to get stuff that they should have just had already. So that's that's causing the overwhelm from the housekeeper. That's certainly adding to your labor, that the time spent back and forth like that. So we really looked at that, and we piloted a program where we said, okay, we know it's going to be really, really expensive to stock every housekeeping cart correctly, to just start fresh, rebuild them, to the standard and the procedure and and what does that cost look like? Well, it was a lot. Not everyone has all the supplies they needed, and so that was one angle of it. But the sell was the pilot. We did, we did, I think it was like 10 property pilot, where we said, okay, we're going to do that. We're going to spend the money up front, and we're going to retrain the staff. And we're going to see if labor dollars went down in those 10 properties. Well, they went down really fast. It was pretty, within 30 days, we knew, okay, we're really onto something here, and we started to open up a little bit more. We surveyed the employees, because you have to get the buy-in with the employees, and they're going to tell you what's wrong with stuff, and that's important. And, a lot of times you're not listening to that, and they're the ones dealing with it every day. But So we did it. We did it company wide, and it was a ton of money. And I thought I was fired because we were spending all the money. But we did get the buy-in from the CEO and stuff. But we saw over 1 year company wide, we saw like a 13% labor reduction in housekeeping hours. Well, that math estimated almost around $2 million just for doing the right thing and not overwhelming an employee, giving them the tools that they need. It was really eye opening, to really see that, and to see that little thing that should have been in place this entire time wasn't, and now you saw the benefit from that. So that was definitely something that we did that was very, very successful, and getting the buy-in was pretty easy at that point, just because of the initial pilot seeing those savings with it.
That's tremendous. I think a follow-up question I have for that really quickly is, so you have a successful pilot, it's an official program. How do you go about maintaining, what does the housekeeping car program look like now? How are you maintaining its success? And
Yeah, so you have to, the standard was already there, but the enforcement was not there. So you have to take a really good look at, okay, well, where was the breakdown? And the reality was that they weren't being held accountable either. So someone has to, we revise some of the head housekeeping training programs where that's, part of their job responsibility now, where they're checking that stuff. We incentivized it a little bit through bonusing, just to make sure that they're keeping that. And it's we've added it to the quality assurance where it's a point loss now, and that affects the GM, that affects their bonus, and we put some bonus with the housekeeper. So once they see the buy-in and that what's in it for me, and you can really sell that, it's much easier to do that. But if you don't get that buy-in or solve for what's in it for me, it's probably not going to be very successful.
Totally. Steph, I'd love to hand it over to you to talk about the platform rollout. I believe it was a scheduling tool.
Yeah. So last year we wanted to, and one of my clients wanted to switch a scheduling platform, and they had 8 locations, so 8 different GMs and 8 different teams. It's obviously a lot of stakeholders to make a change with. And so we wanted to test it out. Now, look, not all software programs are going to let you run a test and a pilot, because sometimes those software programs to onboard you do just as much work with 1 location versus 9 locations. But in this particular case, the platform was like, sure, you can roll it out in 1 location and work through it for a month. So they gave us a 90-day test pilot. And we picked the team that had the biggest team, because I think at the time we were like, we want to see as many variables as we can. I mean, this is a quick service type restaurant, so the teams are small in general, and a large team for them is still like 15 people. It's like not that much. Whereas some of our lower volume stores, had a team of 6 or 7, and they were, full-time, their schedules never changed. So in the testing period, we went with the restaurant that had the most employees, thinking that would give us the best testing environment. And we were very communicative with the GM and with the assistant manager there, but we weren't really getting a lot of feedback from them. They were like, yeah, it's great. The user experience is great. The team loved it. We could see them swapping shifts very easily, much more than they did before. Now, I don't know if that's a good thing for the business, because you want to be able to put your aces in places, right? But we could see that the team felt a lot more engagement with the software than the old one. But the management wasn't, everything seemed fine. And I would caution anyone that word is a dangerous word. Fine is we're not digging deep enough. I'm not looking for the holes. And so when we decided to launch to 2 more locations before we did a full rollout. And when we did that, oh my God, it was like a completely different pilot. So now we had 3 locations, 3 different managers, and a whole slew of information that we didn't have before. And turns out the smart scheduling, like the smart budget tool that the software sold us on, the math wasn't mathin', really. And it was not giving us accurate labor percentages and totals for the daily labor. So when you only looked at one restaurant, it was hard to see that. But when you looked at it across 3, you could all of a sudden see like, wait, what's going on here? Why are these so different? And also, I think, and this is also an important point that we didn't talk about, is who you select to be part of the testing team is so important. Like, you need someone who's almost hypercritical of everything. You need someone who's not afraid to ask questions and raise their hand and I don't like this and let me tell you why. Like, I would rather grab the people who are almost like a pain in the, every day. Like, those are the people that are going to tell you the real challenges and the feedback. Whereas like, sometimes if they're a little bit quiet or they don't speak up in meetings, like, are they going to give you the feedback that matters? Because to Matt's point, you are investing a lot of money into whatever this thing is. And so you want to make sure that that money is worth your time, worth your effort. And so I would rather select people who are going to punch holes in the entire thing and look at it from every angle. And so we ended up launching a full rollout with that platform. And I will tell you, a year later, we're already shopping for a new platform. We're not going to stay on that platform.
Wow.
Yeah, because the smart budgeting tool isn't doing what the whole goal of switching a scheduling software is, to have more control over your labor. And as I'm sure everyone in the room knows, like, the wages per hour are a lot higher than they used to be. So the ability to be able to control that and make the most of it is very important. And so when the tool is not giving you the right math, it makes that very difficult. And labor is one of the things that you can control. So to not have the correct data in front of you in order to do that, it's a fail. So I'm not going to mention the software.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because you do have to pick the right people to test too. Because you don't want the people that are just going to be the yes people and you just go along with it. They're not going to give you feedback because they're afraid they'll be in trouble. They don't want to bust it. And then, but you really want those people. And we do this stuff too. It's like I have 4 or 5 GMs, and some of them are training managers. It's like, okay, break this. Figure out what's messed up about it and break it. And sometimes they do, and it's like, oh, I didn't think of that. But sometimes it's like it's solid, and that's a true indication to not only gain buy-in, but it's working too. Because if they can't break it, then it's going somewhere that you can get buy-in. And now it's just like, well, do you like it or not? And if it made their life easier, then it's a win, right? So that's a good point. Great point.
Yeah, I love the advice of break it. That's something that I think we look at too internally, even, as a product. When we release new features, we love to see customers like not necessarily break it, but reach the limits, right? And like stress test it for us so that we know we're kind of like on the same page as them. We're thinking about problems the exact same way. And I mean, I love what you said about, I think the pulse report is a really good takeaway from the session of, you're trying to get buy-in from people, I think, or buy-in from the field, when a pulse report or a simple like 3-question survey is such an easy way to do that. Sometimes from like, if you're an hourly employee, it's really hard to feel like heard in the workplace, right? Like, you're not necessarily the most bought in for the 6 to 7 hour shift that you're going to be working. But all of these little pinpoints or all of these little parts of their experience, kind of positioning that in a way where, it's valuable for them. It's also really valuable for you. Something as simple as like a scheduling tool, so you're trying to measure their satisfaction, but you're also trying to understand, like, okay, is this like the right tool for our business? Are we going to see the labor savings here? Are managers connecting with it? That's really smart. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, no, I can send that to anybody too. It's 4 easy questions, and it depends on what new hires are a little bit more, because we're gauging like how their training experience was, and just monitoring progression that way. But was our CEO is adamant about these reports. He looks forward to them every quarter, and I'm asked, and every other department is asked, if it's broken, what are we doing about it? What are we trying? What are we changing? Why is it this? Is it solvable? There's a serious discussion about how to fix it.
For sure. That's great. We have 2 minutes left until time. I want to make sure that the audience has the opportunity to ask any last minute questions. Gonna do a do for 30 seconds, maybe not, and then we'll go ahead and close this out. Steph, Matt, if you have any final comments or remarks, the floor is yours.
The only last comment is, if you're a training leader up and coming, like, a pilot is such a great way for you to like level up your skills and your confidence and sort of get a seat at the table, and really utilizing your own experience in the field. And sorry, laughing at your theme there. It's a great time for you to take all that you know from being in the field every day and sort of applying that with a little bit more of a scientific approach, and hopefully make really positive change in your business.
Lean on your people, especially your field trainers and your in the field and employees in general. I mean, the pulse reports are a good thing to do, but I have field trainers that report to me and they're like, but I know this is the right thing to do. And it's like, if they feel and it's in their gut, try to support them and find a way to pilot it. Oftentimes we can't sell it, or we don't have the data. Yes, you do. Find it. Find the problem and support them, because there's been other situations where the trainers would come to me and I'm like, I don't know if I can sell this, and that's negative too. They want to be heard and they want to contribute to the organization, and if you can find a way to do that, and sometimes it's a win and they were right, and sometimes they were wrong, and that's okay too. Tried it.
Great advice. Awesome. Well, we are at time, so I want to go ahead and close this out. If you are available November 14th, join us for our next webinar. We are going to talk about ways you can turn employees into brand ambassadors, very much along the theme of buy-in. And then if you're not already registered for our newsletter, you can do so here. You'll get the recap by simply going to our website and dropping in your email address. Thank you so much, Matt and Steph. You guys were fantastic panelists. Thank you for sharing your expertise. If there are no other comments, cool. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today. Everybody have a great rest of your week.
Thanks for having us. This was
Thank
fun.
you.
Thank you, everybody.
So
Bye.
fun.